Hi, welcome back to the channel and another review today, carrying on my Nightmare on Elm Street series, today with part 3, The Dream Warriors. Definitely a bit of a fan favourite, this one, widely regarded as being the best sequel to the original film, and I would probably agree with that. I actually really quite like this sequel. I don't think it's quite up there with the original. There's still a few things about it that don't quite work for me, but generally speaking, I have a lot of fun with this movie. It has a lot of really nice ideas, does something new with the plot and the story, and yeah, a lot about it really works. So the plot of this one is much more like a team-up movie here, where you get all these teenagers together into this psychiatric unit. A lot of them the doctors there think they're there because they have suicidal tendencies and other issues, and it's actually because they're all struggling to deal with Freddy Krueger in these nightmares, and they end up all banding together in order to try and take him down. And also here you get the return of Heather Langenkamp. She's a little bit older here, and she is one of the psychiatric doctors that kind of comes in to assist and help out, because obviously she's been through this before, so she forms a bond with all these kids and they try to all kind of get through this together. So this one was directed by Chuck Russell, but they did have Wes Craven on board with all the creative direction and stuff. I'm pretty sure he wrote the script, just generally helped develop the film. He definitely had a lot more involvement in this one than he did with 2. And you can see that here, because the writing on this film, the direction of it, feels a lot more focused than it did in the second film. I did a review recently for the second. I think it's good fun, but it's a bit all over the place with regard to the logic, the script, everything like that. This is a much tighter film. It has a direction. It knows what it's trying to do, and I think it executes it really well. And I'm sure a lot of that was due to the involvement, once again, from Wes Craven. I do really like the cast here as well. This was led by Patricia Arquette, huge actress that obviously went on to much bigger things. It's a shame actually that she didn't come back to the documentary I watched on Elm Street. It would have been really great to kind of hear her take on the movie and her experience filming this, because it was very interesting watching the development of this film, and the stress and the troubles of trying to get everything done and make it all work, just given how much effects work they were, how many actors they brought in. And I'd love to have heard her take, but I guess she was just bigger than the series by this point when they filmed that documentary. But she's really great in this film. It's a subtle performance. She really does come across as this really troubled young girl. She's got a nice chemistry with the rest of the cast, and yeah, she's a great lead to follow, and I really like her connection that she has with Nancy from the original film as well. But the other characters are just fun as well. Even the ones that you don't get a load of screen time with all of them. They're kind of all coming together, they're introduced, and then it's straight into the action, really. But they all give you just enough that you can kind of connect with them. You find them likeable, and they all just kind of work together. You've got Joey, Kincaid, the other guy who gets the puppet thing happen to him. Really nice chemistry between all these characters, and I really do enjoy going on the ride with them. I think the effects in this film are really quite amazing. Obviously, it's got that 80s vibe about it, where you can see some of it looks it's a bit crazy, maybe a little bit ambitious at times. But it's so much fun. It's really it's so enjoyable to watch. A few scenes in particular, as I just mentioned, the scene where the first guy in the hospital that gets taken out, where his tendons are kind of taken out and he's strung up like a puppet and walked out to his death. Just a very kind of pretty shocking scene, really, and I think it looks quite amazing. So I really do appreciate all of that kind of stuff. Welcome to Primetime Bitch, just such an iconic scene. Freddy coming out of the TV, just wild creative stuff like that just makes this one such an entertaining ride. And obviously Dream Warriors was the first movie in the franchise as well, where tonally it's quite different. It's weird, the way you describe 2, it sounds like that would be a much more camp film, and it is in a way, but it definitely still has a very dark undertone to it. It's got the scares still. Freddy especially is quite menacing and really quite scary in the film, whereas here they started to go the route of Freddy being this big icon, this big personality, kind of giving him more screen time, more lines, more one-liners, fun dialogue with the rest of the characters, all this kind of stuff. So the movie isn't scary, I don't think, in the same way that 1 and 2 are, particularly 1. I do think they balance it quite nicely here, though, where you do still get some slightly eerie and creepy scenes, and you do genuinely feel for these kids like they really are in peril. You want them to get out of this situation, but at the same time, there's fun to be had with it as well. It's not a really dark film tonally like the first 2 are. So even though I don't particularly like the trajectory of where they decided to take the series from here, kind of making Freddy so comedic, no longer having anything in the shadows, bringing him to the forefront and really having us as the audience kind of root for the villain, I didn't really like that direction, just because I think Freddy is such a great horror villain. He really is quite a creepy character. The way they do it in the first film is just so effective. And okay, they did it once, you can't ever quite recreate that again, but even still, I don't like how over the top it went with the comedy. And of course, the Dream Warriors was the first movie to kind of set that in motion. I definitely think here as well, like I said with 2, this is kind of a problem that really runs throughout the whole franchise. If you're somebody that is paying too much attention to everything that's going on, and you want the lore of this dream world to make sense and it to live within the rules that it sets up, there are issues here definitely still. There are definitely moments where things don't really add up, don't really make sense. How did somebody get there? When people are dreaming versus when they're not. There's seemingly a bit of overlap between the 2 that I think when you start to really think about it, it doesn't always make sense, and that's a problem that just, as I say, runs throughout this whole franchise, and that again is the case here. Not quite as jarring with 2 as with 2, because that just has scenes where they just make absolutely no sense whatsoever, and they decided just to carry on with it because they were making a cool scene. But here there are definitely still moments where you think, not sure that's really working. I do think one thing the Dream Warriors struggles with is trying to put too many different plot ideas into this one short movie that it really didn't need. So you have this subplot about Nancy trying to reconnect with her dad to help her out with the situation, and they don't do enough with that to kind of really justify it being there or really flesh it out properly. He just kind of shows up at the end of the film. It shows they've had this kind of drift apart since the events of the first film, and he comes in to try and help her, but I don't feel like they did enough with it. If they're going to bring that character back, great, but maybe do something a little bit more with it. And also they tried to give a backstory as well to Freddy, with his mother being this nun who went through this nightmarish, horrific situation. And I think all of that kind of stuff is the movie trying too hard just to add loads of extra lore and details and reasons to come back, and we have to put more in here. We have to tell you more about the backstory of all this kind of stuff that I just don't think is necessary. Freddy Krueger is most scary and most interesting when he's kind of a bit of an unknown. About the past of why he died, what happened between him and the kids of Elm Street and the parents. I like all that stuff, but going here into his mum was this nun who was raped by all these just crazy stuff like that I think it just feels a bit silly to me to kind of add that level of backstory into this movie, because it also means that now not only do we have the supernatural elements of Freddy being in these kids' dreams, which you're willing to accept for the concept of the story, but now you've also got this kind of ghost nun wandering about, and one of the doctors is following around, all this kind of stuff. And again, it's the movie trying too hard to put too many details, too many plot points in, and making the movie feel maybe slightly overstuffed at some points. I do think as well, perhaps the ending isn't quite as good as the build-up. I think all the really great scenes in this movie really come in the first hour, as Freddy first comes back into the fold, a lot of the nightmare sequences, the kind of building up these characters and how they're kind of banding together. I love all of that stuff. But when you actually get to the final conflict with Freddy, when they're trying to overcome him, it doesn't, again, it's just the payoff isn't quite as good as the build-up, and it's not quite as good as the final act of the first movie. Obviously, that's where the easy comparisons are made. The final act, barring that final scene, of course, that I talked about in my review, but the final lead-up and the final conflict with Freddy and Nancy in the first film is really quite intense, and I just don't get that same level of intensity with Dream Warriors, even though it is still a lot of fun. And I wish they kind of still had them taking out Freddy, with them kind of overcoming him within his dreams, because as we talk about the theme in this movie of it being about young teenagers kind of overcoming their own personal demons, and that's really the metaphor for them fighting out Freddy. It's them becoming stronger, dealing with fear, taking away the power that fear has over them, therefore defeating Freddy. But they also decide to add in here this kind of religious element as well, where, oh, not only do you have to overcome Freddy, you know, the guy comes back, stops by the church on the way, brings us holy water, because, you know, that will deal with him as well. Kind of trying to mix those two together here, I don't think really works. This isn't a religious horror film, and I like the kind of long-standing theme throughout this, that it is about teenagers kind of overcoming their problems to be able to beat Freddy. I like that, whereas they kind of try and mishmash different stuff at the end here, which I don't think really works that well. But yeah, overall, I really have a good time with Dream Warriors. I've rewatched it a number of times throughout my life. I do enjoy this sequel quite a bit. And from my last viewing, I would say it is actually my second favourite in the franchise. Still got a few more movies, of course, to go through, so that position might change, but still highly recommended and easily one of the best sequels in the franchise for sure. So definitely a lot to recommend about this Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. So I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5. Please do let me know down in the comments if you've seen The Dream Warriors. Let me know all of your thoughts about this movie. Take care. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.